Generalization or generalizability is an important aspect of the process of research. Many research evaluators or thesis examiners often ask questions related to the generalizability of the student research. So what is generalization in research, and what is mainly the difference between quantitative and qualitative research generalization? This is something that we will briefly respond to in this presentation. So first of all, in social science research, generalization basically refers to the process of applying findings from a specific study or from a specific research project to broader populations, contexts, or theories. Generally, the extent to which researchers can generalize their findings depend on several factors, and so those factors include the research methods that they use, the sample that they have taken for the study, and the research context. Generally, the types of generalization in social science research are two main types: statistical generalization, which is generally the concept used in quantitative studies, and theoretical or naturalistic generalization, which is generally the concept of generalization used in qualitative research. So first we will discuss generalization in quantitative research, and then we will discuss generalization in qualitative research, and then we will summarize the difference. So first of all, generalization in quantitative research basically refers to the ability of the research process or research outcomes to apply the results of a particular study or a particular research based on a sample to a larger population. So generally in quantitative research, we know that samples are representative of population and data is quantitative in nature. As a result, these samples are generally large, they are random, and they are probability samples, which means that the samples are representative of the population. Secondly, the objective in quantitative research is actually to either test hypotheses based on the sample or the findings of the sample, and to measure variables in a way that is replicable and that is statistically valid. Generally, in quantitative research, we make use of methods such as surveys, experiments, or structured interviews in some cases, where data is analyzed statistically. So when we can actually generalize the findings from the sample to larger population, that will be called quantitative generalization. And an example of this could be, for example, if we conduct a survey of 1,000 university students to assess their use of social media during study hours, or in what ways university students make use of social media during study hours. So if this sample, this 1,000 sample is randomly chosen and the result is statistically significant, we can then generalize the findings to the population or to the overall university students in that region or in that country. Generally, the key features of quantitative generalization is that quantitative generalization, first of all, aims to predict or explain behaviors and trends in larger population. Secondly, the validity of quantitative research basically depends on the sampling method. So the more the sampling method is accurate and the samples are representative of the population, the more there is the chance of reliability and the reliability of the instrument, the more there is the chance of quantitative generalization to larger population. Now, what is the concept of generalization in qualitative research? It is, you can say, quite different. In qualitative research studies, generally, we do not make use of quantitative generalization as a concept. We make use of, you can say, inductive generalization, or or naturalistic generalization, where the concept that we make use of is called transferability or naturalistic generalization. So what is naturalistic generalization? It is generalization where the findings can be applied to similar contexts rather than to a broader population. So the findings from this particular study could be applied to or could be understood in terms of similar contexts, where if we conduct another study with similar context in similar situations, we can be sure that the findings can be applied to those settings. Sampling typically involves non-random sampling in qualitative research or purposive or small sample sizes. The goal of qualitative research in general is to get rich, in-depth insights rather than a statistically representative sample. Secondly, in terms of objective, qualitative studies try to explore and understand complex situations in human experiences and social processes. And the methods that we make use of in qualitative research generally are case studies, and so we collect data through interviews or observations, and so we make use of ethnographies, and we conduct thematic analysis rather than statistical analysis. An example of qualitative research where we can make use of qualitative generalization will be conducting a case study that explores a specific group of teachers in a particular rural school district, for example, who have adopted who have to adapt to certain challenges, such as, for example, lack of resources. And so while the findings from this particular school or schools in a particular rural area might not be generalizable statistically to all teachers, they could be transferable to other rural schools where the context is similar and where the issues are similar. Generally, key features of qualitative generalization are that qualitative generalizations focus on understanding specific context and whether the findings can be applied or transferred. Generally, this actually depends on the detailed knowledge of the contexts and the insights of the researchers, or even insights of the readers related to the application of findings from one particular context to another particular context with similar features. Generally, the concept of transferability in qualitative research depends on the depth of description provided by the researcher. So the more detail there is related to the particular research context, the more the reader will have the ability to actually generalize. And so the similarities between the research context and the reader's own context, where the reader wants to actually apply the findings from the particular research. So in this case, we can say that researchers can suggest the possible transferability of the research findings, but it is the reader who has actually to decide whether they can take insights from particular contexts, from findings of research conducted in particular contexts to other contexts. And so rich detail, contextual detail is important in qualitative research for naturalistic generalization. Now, to summarize the difference between quantitative generalization and qualitative generalization. So first, the purpose of quantitative generalization is to apply findings to larger population, while the purpose of qualitative generalization is to apply findings to similar contexts or experiences. Secondly, in terms of sample, generally quantitative generalization depends on large, random, and probability-based samples, while qualitative generalization depends on smaller, purposive, and non-random samples where the information could be explored in detail. Generally, the methods used in quantitative generalization or in quantitative studies are service, experiment, statistical analysis, While in qualitative studies, that could be generalized, make use of case studies, interviews, and ethnographies. The nature, in terms of nature, quantitative generalization is statistical and with broad application, while qualitative generalization is thematic, context dependent, and it follows the principle of transferability. In terms of example, we can say if we conduct a survey of 1,000 people to generalize to a population of 10,000 people in a particular institution, for example, or in a particular area. On the other hand, an example of qualitative study that could be naturalistically generalized include a case study of a specific community to inform similar communities. Validity, in terms of validity, the focus of generalization is statistical validity and reliability, while in terms of qualitative research, it focuses on in-depth and rich description or thick description of the context in which the study is conducted. In terms of outcome, the quantitative research is generalizable to population if statistically significant results come forward. And in terms of qualitative generalization or in terms of qualitative research, the results could be transferable to similar contexts if applicable, keeping in view the insights or the details provided by the researcher, but also the insights or the way the reader actually understands and could transfer the context and the findings to the new situation or the new location or the new site that they want to generalize the particular study to.